What's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video, and today I want to give you my 4 biggest winners and losers of the 2024 NBA offseason. It was a pretty eventful one. There weren't superstars flying all over the place, but there were a lot of moves made that really shifted the power dynamic in the NBA. And while there are still a couple months left until the season, for the most part, the dust has settled. We had free agency, the draft, like I said, a lot of big trades. We kind of have a good idea of how most of these teams are going to look going into this upcoming year. So let's talk about who did the best and who really struggled this summer. I'm going to start with a winner, then go to a loser, and go back and forth until we've gone through all the teams. I'll mention a couple of honorable mentions at the end of the video as well, but first, leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy this video, hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future uploads, and comment down below who you think the biggest winners and losers were of this off-season. Also, I'm recording this on August 16th. If things change after this video, don't come back and clown me. With that being said, let's get into the list. First winner I want to talk about are the Philadelphia 76ers. Easily one of my biggest winners of the offseason, and I think the biggest winner in the Eastern Conference. They had a great one. They added Paul George, of course. It's a move that's controversial, but in my opinion, when you can have the opportunity to add an all-star level player next to a rising all-star, even all-NBA talent in Tyrese Maxey and an MVP level guy in Joel Embiid, without having to trade anybody, give up any assets, you go ahead and do that. And Paul George, in my opinion, will be a seamless fit as that third option, as that connective wing. Tobias Harris's contract came off the books, which that money also allowed them to bring in role players like Caleb Martin, for example, taking him away from the Miami Heat, a guy that I think is really going to contribute. They brought in Eric Gordon. They brought back Kelly Oubre, who's a big-time contributor for them last season. This is a Sixers team that, in my opinion, is firmly in the top 2 to 3 teams in the East, depending on how you feel about them and the Knicks. But this squad is poised more than maybe ever in the Joel Embiid era to compete for a championship out there in the Eastern Conference. I'm a big believer in the Sixers team. I think they're going to do great things. I'm excited to see what Nick Nurse does. If Embiid can stay healthy, this is a team that, in my opinion, has a real shot to not only win the Eastern Conference, but win the NBA Finals. Now, health is tough to ask for the Sixers, but in my opinion, they put themselves in the best position possible. I think they hit this out of the park. Daryl Morey had a wide open opportunity with all the cap space in the world this summer, and he capitalized. Plus, they kept all their picks. They didn't have to make any massive trades, so in the future, there's still ways they can maneuver this roster around Embiid and Maxey if they see fit. This was a home run offseason. Again, like I said, probably the best offseason in the East. I've got no complaints whatsoever about this team. Then we have our first loser, and I'm going to go right to the team that lost Paul George with the Los Angeles Clippers. Losing PG is a big blow. Now, they've made a number of moves to try and make up for that, and I do think they added some decent depth, like brought in Derrick Jones Jr., who was an integral piece to the Mavericks making a finals run. Mo Bamba as a backup big. Chris Dunn, who I think is a pretty sneaky, underrated signing, a really good defender that has improved offensively. They brought in Kevin Porter Jr., and they brought back Nick Batum, who they traded over to the Sixers in the James Harden deal. They do still have Kawhi Leonard and James Harden at the helm. They showed some crazy flashes last season, but in my opinion, losing Paul George means that the window has closed. I don't think any of these depth pieces they brought in are going to be enough to make up for his absence, especially because even with Paul George, we didn't know if that team was good enough to compete for a championship. They showed flashes throughout the season, had that one stretch where they were the hottest team in the league, but then quickly fell off a cliff. Injuries caught up to them like they always do, and they were bounced in the first round. In my opinion, their chance to win a championship in the Kawhi Leonard era has come and gone. Harden is regressing. Kawhi Leonard is really good when he's healthy, but you can hardly ever rely on that. These free agency acquisitions aren't saving them whatsoever, in my opinion. They're kind of just stalling now until eventually they decide to trade Harden and trade Kawhi Leonard, or they end up walking in free agency in a few years where they will have more cap space. Maybe they can bring in more stars then, but it's just kind of a waiting period for the Clippers, in my opinion. This is a play-in team. I could even see a world where they deal with some injuries to Kawhi or James Harden, and this team doesn't even make the play-in tournament in 2025, which might have seemed crazy going back a year ago, but I'm just not a big believer in this squad. I think they had to keep Paul George to even keep a slimmer of hope alive to compete for a championship. Losing him slammed the window shut and ultimately makes them one of the biggest losers of this offseason. Sticking with the Western Conference and going back to the winner side, I've got to talk about my favorite team in the Oklahoma City Thunder. They had an A++ offseason, if you ask me. It started off by adding Alex Caruso in that trade for Josh Giddey, just 1-for-1, didn't have to give up a single pick. Giddey has potential, but he was never going to reach that in Oklahoma City. It never made sense for him to stay there, and he was a negative a lot of times throughout the season, especially in the playoffs, and they flip him for one of the best role players in the league, a lockdown defender and a knockdown shooter in Alex Caruso, who could either slot into the starting lineup or be great off the bench. They also helped address one of their biggest issues, which was extra big man play, by adding Isaiah Hartenstein, the biggest free agent acquisition in Thunder history. He was amazing all throughout the Knicks playoff run, really stepped up in the absence of Mitchell Robinson with that injury. A good playmaker, a good screener, a guy that has shown an ability to knock down the outside shot at a number of destinations he's been to. Definitely going to help out with the rebounding, one of the better offensive rebounders in the NBA. Whether he's starting next to Chet or coming off the bench, he's going to be amazing. Not to mention, they brought back Aaron Wiggins and Isaiah Joe on longer-term contracts, on great value as well, two integral role players to this team. Had a great draft, if you ask me, with Nikola Topic and Dylan Jones and AJ Mitchell. I'm really excited about the future of this team. They've established themselves as perhaps the front runner to win the Western Conference, at least according to betting odds. This is the best chance the Thunder have had to win a championship in quite some time. The rebuild is firmly over. They are now a title-level team, and a big part of that is because Sam Presti had just one of the best off seasons in Thunder history. Meanwhile, we've got a Western Conference team who really didn't do much at all, making them a pretty big loser, and that's the Los Angeles Lakers, because they pretty much did nothing. Like, no movement at all. There have been rumors about them maybe trading for Jeremy Grant, and I would like that acquisition a ton if it happens, but they've done nothing so far. If you take a look at the roster on paper, it's pretty much the same thing. D'Angelo Russell, Austin Reeves, Rui Hachimura, LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Gabe Vincent, Max Christie, Cam Reddish, Jared Vanderbilt, Jackson Hayes. Like, this team is pretty much the same. Now, I did like the addition of Dalton Connect. I thought that was a pretty good draft pickup. Bronny James is interesting. I'm higher on him than a lot of people, but this is not a roster that can compete in the Western Conference. I think that was pretty clear last season when LeBron and AD were healthy for a majority of the year, and they didn't manage to go anywhere. They lost in the first round to the Denver Nuggets. Maybe with JJ Redick in town, that'll help out a lot, because I don't think Darvin Ham did a great job coaching last year, but just adding JJ Redick isn't going to turn them from a play-in team to the team that's standing on top of the Western Conference when it's all said and done. They have to make moves, whether it's mid-season, leading up to the year. They had to do something, and they've just done nothing at all, while a lot of the other teams, the younger powerhouses in the West, like the Thunder, the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Dallas Mavericks, all these squads have made significant strides. The Lakers have done nothing, and sure, LeBron James feels inhuman that he'll never, ever regress. Same thing with Anthony Davis, who was amazing last year, but things are going to start to catch up to them. You can't ask them to carry this team at an exponential level forever. You need to add more talent through some avenue. This team's just not nearly good enough, and other teams in the West widen that gap between the Lakers and them. Speaking of the Dallas Mavericks, they're another one of my winners. They had a really good offseason. They took a team that went to the finals, and I think made some interesting, smart moves to try and build off of that. There are a lot of teams that will make the finals and kind of just rest on their laurels, won't really do much, and just hope that internal development can kind of carry them forward. And if the Mavericks did that, I don't think a lot of people would have been surprised, because they were really good. You know, you've got young players like Derek Lively who could progress, PJ Washington in a full year, Daniel Gafford in a full year with the team. Of course, you've got Luka Doncic, who's only getting better and better, but instead they said, no, we want to go ahead and make some adjustments to try and overcome the obstacle that was the Boston Celtics and a rapidly improving Western Conference. Big move, brought in Klay Thompson. Wasn't his best year last season, but now playing alongside Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, and I'm sure motivated after everybody clowned him all last season, especially after going, 0 for 10 and having no points. I believe it was 0 for 10 in that elimination game against the Sacramento Kings. Clay's going to be motivated. I think he comes in and has a really good year, and he still was a sniper from downtown last season on a team that didn't have a lot of offensive talent. Najee Marshall comes in as the DJJ replacement. He's a really good player. I'm excited to see him in the fold. Brought in Spencer Dinwiddie, who I'm not super high on at this point, but it does add some depth. And Quentin Grimes, that's a young player I'm really excited about. Did not have a great tenure with the Pistons after landing there mid-season. Of course, leaving the Knicks in the Bojan Bogdanovic trade, but I think this is a spot where Quentin Grimes can hopefully refine some of that two-way wing potential that we saw a lot of times with the New York Knicks in his early stages. I'm excited for this team. I think this Mavericks squad is, again, going to be one of the front runners to win the Western Conference, up there with the juggernauts of the West that we've talked about, and if they were once again the reigning West champs, wouldn't surprise me whatsoever when you add a knockdown shooter like Klay, a good Derrick Jones Jr. replacement, and defender Najee Marshall, and some other interesting pieces. It makes sense why you're one of the favorites. Once again, sticking in the Western Conference, another loser are the Denver Nuggets. I remember when they won the title in 2022, people were discussing about if they could end up as a new modern dynasty, or at least make a few finals. They had pretty much the unanimous best player in the world in Jokic, great supporting pieces like Jamal Murray, who went berserk in that run, Aaron Gordon, MPJ, KCP. Off the bench, they had Bruce Brown, and like Christian Brown was playing really well, a rising young player, a bunch of young talent in the wings, draft picks. They felt pretty much set, and now a couple years later, later, there were a lot of question marks surrounding them. Specifically this offseason, they lost Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and that might not seem like a massive deal to some people, but I think that's going to be a big-time blow to this squad. He was their best point of attack defender, a reliable 3-and-D wing, and Christian Braun, I am excited to see what he can do in a larger role, but I don't think he's nearly ready to step up and give them that elite defense while being that knockdown shooter. And as a team, I worry about their shooting entirely because Aaron Gordon really isn't that kind of guy. They did bring in Russell Westbrook, and he's one of my favorite players of all time as a Thunder fan, but he doesn't really have the best shot in the world. A lot of the guys off the bench are unproven. They brought in Dario Saric as a backup big, which is fine, but he was a little bit inconsistent with some of his minutes for the Golden State Warriors last year, who weren't great. Like, I don't think they did nearly enough to make up for the loss of KCP and help build this squad out further than what they were last season. Now they're going to be a contender because they have Jokic, they have Jamal Murray, who has looked pretty bad since that playoff run this past year. He looked bad for Team Canada. I don't know. I'm a little bit worried about the Denver Nuggets. They desperately need some of this young talent to go ahead and pan out to fill out that depth, and if it doesn't, this is a team that we could be talking about maybe tearing things down or at least retooling in a new sense within the next couple of seasons. I doubt they trade Nikola Jokic or anything, but it could look very different in a few years. Also, a big blow to them is that Deron Holmes, a big I loved in the draft that I thought could contribute from day one, ended up getting a season-ending injury in Summer League because the blows just kind of seem to keep coming for the Denver Nuggets. And the final team I have listed on my biggest winners list are the New York Knicks. Now, they did lose Isaiah Hartenstein, which is a big blow. He was really good for them, but I think they did a couple of things that are so massive that it makes it up, basically, in my mind. The first thing was bringing Mikal Bridges, one of the biggest trades of this offseason. Nets were asking for a lot. Knicks were willing to go ahead and pay that price at another Villanova guy that is just a seamless fit. I know it was a lot of draft picks, but it's worth it when you're trying to compete for a championship. And a starting lineup of Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, Julius Randle, Mitchell Robinson is so absurdly talented. You have the wings to defend the wings of Boston and Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown using OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges. Both those guys can knock down outside shots great if they need to. Mikal has now some experience as that one option over in Brooklyn. Now he's going to be like a 3, maybe even 4 option on some nights. That's huge for them. Brunson showcased that he's a true superstar last year, if you ask me. Randall's back. They've got some really solid depth off the bench with Dante DiVincenzo and Josh Hart. The Mikal trade, in my opinion, really solidified them as legitimate championship contenders. And I don't care how many picks you have to give up. If you can do that, it's a pretty good move to go ahead and make. Then they extended Jalen Brunson, which would have been big in its own right, but also they convinced him to take a massive pay cut. His extension is 4 years, $156 million, which is of course a ridiculous amount, but that's $113 million less than he could have taken otherwise. So that's really going to help them with roster flexibility, with helping them pay other guys like Mikal when they have to, and OG and Julius Randle, whatever they have to do to kind of fill out this team in the future. If they trade for another star, they now have so much more financial flexibility, and it's especially important with the new luxury tax aprons, which are hurting teams like the Nuggets, who we just talked about. I can't overstate how massive that is that their superstar was willing to take that pay cut. So between getting Brunson on that long-term deal where it gives them so much flexibility and bringing Mikal Bridges, I think the Knicks overall had a really good summer that makes them right there with the Celtics and Sixers as the 3 best teams in the Eastern Conference. A few honorable mentions for the winners list. The Kings, of course, added DeMar DeRozan. The more that I think about the trade, the more that I've warmed up to it. I like the idea. Still would like to see them make a couple of other moves if possible, but if they go into the season with this team, they're going to be really good. The Orlando Magic, of course, adding Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, that's a really big addition. Going to give them a lot of space in which they desperately need alongside Paolo and Franz, plus some more lockdown defense, so a great Magic defense becomes even better. And the Cleveland Cavaliers, because they extended Donovan Mitchell. That was the big question for them coming into the summer. Would they extend him, or would a trade saga begin? He said he wanted to stay. They kept him in town, and now it's just a question of how do they build this team around him to go ahead and make themselves a championship contender. Also, a shout out to the Suns. I like them adding Tyus Jones and Monte Morris, even if I have big question marks about their defense and how the lineups are going to look when the regular season rolls around. And finally, wrapping up the losers list and the list as a whole, we've got the Miami Heat, who, much like the Lakers, who they played in the 2020 finals, pretty much did nothing this offseason. Now, they did add Alec Burks, so that is a player, but I don't think he's going to make that massive of a difference for this team. It's not going to be the difference between them losing in the first round, which, yeah, Rozier and Butler were hurt, but even if they were healthy, that would not have changed the fact that they were going to lose pretty comfortably to the Celtics, if you ask me. It's not going to turn them from that into a team that can compete for a championship with the much improved Sixers, with the much improved Knicks, and the juggernaut Celtics. It's just not going to happen. Losing Caleb Martin also to the Sixers is a pretty big blow. They did did draft Klay Thompson, who I'm excited about. I think that was a really good pick. I think Bam could have a pretty good year. Maybe with a full year for Rozier, the offense looks better this season because it was really rough last year. But in my opinion, this is a team that is not there at a championship contention level. Maybe they could win a playoff series, potentially. Even that, I think, is a little bit of a stretch, depending on what the matchup is, because the East has just gotten so much better. Like, the Pacers are rapidly improving. The Magic are. The Cavaliers kept Donovan Mitchell in town. The Bucks, I think, are going to be better this year. I think they've had a fine offseason. Like, so many teams are getting better, and the Heat are just standing still continuously. They've done this summer after summer. I want them to get Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo more help. It just never seems to come. So, yeah, I don't think this is like a bad team, but it's not a team that's anywhere close to competing for a championship. And when you have Jimmy getting up there in age, a guy that has given so much to the franchise and really desperately wants to win a ring for Miami, you got to do something for him. And instead, Pat Riley once again does pretty much nothing. With all that being said, those are my biggest winners and losers of the NBA offseason. Let me know down below in the comments, like I said earlier, what you thought about the list. Who were your biggest winners and losers? What did you agree with? What did you disagree with? Love to hear what y'all have to say in those comments. Also, like I said earlier, do leave a like and subscribe. Helps the channel out a ton. And yeah, let me know what other teams or concepts you want to see me go ahead and cover on this channel throughout the summer. We've got a couple of months now that the Olympics have come and gone, which, by the way, thank you so much for the support in the Olympic videos. They did really, really well. I can't thank y'all enough, especially because I couldn't even use footage, yet y'all really showed out. I appreciate that. But yeah, now that the summer is really in the thick of it for the NBA season, there's not a lot to talk about, so I'm interested to hear what you want to see me cover. I'm going to talk about a lot of different teams. I recently made a video on the Spurs, which was pretty fun to make. Also, I have my 1,000 video coming up here pretty soon, so let me know what you would like to see for my 1,000 video. I have a really interesting concept in mind that might turn into a super long video, so I'm not sure if I quite want to do that, but it would be kind of funny. So let me know what you want to see down below in the comments if you have any ideas. And yeah, I appreciate y'all watching. I will see you all later. Everyone, say it back.